I think if the CEO is engaged and is willing to be engaged properly, then by all means, that's great, and they should be involved. But if they're not actually really going to be properly engaged, you're better off not having them involved at all. But if it is handed off to someone else, that person has to be able to work without fear of, oops, if I do something wrong, I'm going to be fired. Where they have to be imbued with the authority for that project, for that campaign, for whatever, imbued with the authority that the CEO would have to make those decisions and to not have to go back and sit in 12 meetings and detail things and then come back and, it's absolutely, sure, you have to ask questions and go back and forth until, before the campaign is. But once that campaign is going, and even in just the initial build-up to it, you need to have someone who, if you're working with, they can actually make decisions. Because if you're working, particularly as a consultant, if you're working with someone who can't make decisions,
right,
you can't get anything done.
Right.
So it's all well and good to turn it over to community manager or VP or whatever level, but only if they actually are allowed to make decisions and allowed to make mistakes.
Right.
And if they're not, then don't,
Yeah. So one thing that I've also noticed is, especially mid to larger companies, they're kind of a little nervous. Some are getting a little more engaged, whether it's on LinkedIn or whether it's on Scoopit or Twitter. Not so much Facebook. I haven't noticed, a lot of the companies that I've seen on LinkedIn actually engage on Facebook, which, again, I don't blame them. Facebook is not for everyone.
Right.
But in order for a campaign to be successful, not only do you need to figure out, what the criteria are, what the goals are, but also, are the people willing to, get up and make the mistake, and will the company back them up? Which I guess is the question I mean to ask. How much or how involved, if you're looking at a small, maybe 5 to 10 size company, I'm talking real small, up to 100, how involved should the community or should the employees be a part of that campaign? Should you, have a lunch with everybody and say, hey, look, we're getting ready to, do this beta or whatever?
I think it's a great idea, because I think that whoops, you're frozen. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I think that your first community really are your employees, and if your employees aren't invested in promoting the company, I don't mean that every single press release everybody needs to tweet out and post on their Facebook page, but if they're not willing to be involved on a social level, there's that's really the nature of the beast now, and why are they working? Is particularly when you're talking about smaller companies, where you're not talking about like a gigantic corporation, which can be a little faceless to a degree. But when you're talking about that small business, if your employees, if you can't get your employees excited and engaged in spreading the message, then how do you expect to be able to get people who you're not paying to be excited and engaged?
Whoops, I noticed I just had muted myself while I was typing. No, and I think it's real important. That's something that I've noticed when I've worked with large corporations. They really don't care how involved their employees are, because they don't see the value in having their employees as part of the campaign, which I think is huge. Not only are they your fans, but if they're happy employees, they'll definitely go out to bat for you. But that can be, a slippery slope. I've seen a couple of huge social faux pas with huge corporations like McDonald's, when they were, some of their hashtags, what do you like about Mickey D, or I forget what it was, and everybody
was the Mickey. McD stories, yeah.
Right. I mean, talk about a backfire. I thought, what an awesome idea to really have the community. But, as far as I'm concerned, Mickey D has already, well, I don't think I've ever eaten at McDonald's, but if I were, I mean, their service sucks, their food sucks, I mean, all of that. So,
but to their credit, I thought that they handled it really well after the fact.
Sure.
And they've been very open about it, and they actually will address that topic at conferences, and that I give them credit for. I mean, you're right. It was just, that was a huge misstep, but they've owned the misstep at least, and I think that that's as important as anything else.
Right. Well, I don't want to take up all the time. Doc, do you want to ask a question? And I think we're almost done with Amy. We've just been I've been badgering her with.
Actually, the two questions that I had wanted to pursue, we already touched on. But it's interesting that I think that there's so much of what we're talking about today. Whether it's the mentoring or the personal branding, handling the accounts for clients, it all intermingles, and I think that a lot of times, not only clients but even some SEOs that I know, they get a little bit myopic. They start to focus on the one wheel without remembering the fact that car has four. Okay, and you can do terrible damage by neglecting one of those wheels. And when you start to talk about reputation management, for instance, we had a saying in the Navy: it takes 1,000 attaboys to wipe out one "aw crap." One misstep can just haunt you for years.
Yep.
And it's very important to avoid those missteps, but you're still going to have them. They do occur. So knowing how you're going to handle them beforehand is critical, because knee-jerk reactions rarely work out well. You need to have your disaster recovery planned beforehand to avoid those. And some companies have shown SHONE, like a star, that they obviously had that well thought out. Right. They knew what the next step up. When do you escalate things? What do you own up to? What do you deny? What do you remain silent on? And to me, denying and remaining silent are equally bad. I think you need to address them all. Don't run them into the ground. Don't keep them alive if it's negative. But you still need to step up to the bar and address it and own up to it. If you screwed up, you own up to it, because that builds credibility for the brand, whether it be you personally or a major corporation.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I used to cover the city of Hollywood for the Miami Herald a very long time ago. And I wrote a story that got the parks director in trouble with the state because they bulldozed a beach. And it was a front page story, and they had to do all this stuff. But do you know what? Within an hour of my calling and leaving a message for him, he called me back. He talked to me on the record about it for all the follow-up stories. He spoke to me. And when I left covering the city, he shook my hand and he said, "I didn't always like what you wrote, but you were always fair." And I said, "Well, you know what? I appreciate that you always return my phone call." But he was smart, and so was his city manager. They knew that it would be worse for them in the long run if they didn't pick up the phone and call.
Oh, yeah.
You don't pick a fight with someone who buys ink by the barrel. Sorry, it's an old newspaper saying, but
I like that one.
But it's a very similar thing to the way it is in terms of being silent on social. There's so much in old school media that translates into social media that it's just a different way of thinking about it, but it's the same things.
Yeah, it's the same basics, different mindset. That's all.
Yep.
Well, Amy, what would you say? We've covered quite a breadth of topics here, but what would you say for anyone that is interested in building a community? What are the three main takeaways that you think they need to focus on?
Sure. First, I think is if they're building community for someone other than themselves is to be very clear what that voice is, and to know that, and to be aware of what that voice is. And if you're doing it for yourself, to be true to your own voice, because people know when you're not. Two, I would say figuring out where your community is. So if they're on Google Plus and they're not on Facebook, or they're on Pinterest and they're not on Tumblr, be on Pinterest and don't be on Tumblr. Be on G Plus and don't be on Facebook. Not everybody's community is everywhere. And, so find where they are and choose. You don't have to be on every platform, because if you try to be on every platform, you're going to fail, because you don't have enough time in the day to even focus on 2 of them properly. And 3 is know who your community is, and it's actually 3-part. Who they are, who you want them to be, and who they want you to be. And somewhere in the Venn diagram, intersection of those 3 is the spot that you strive for.
Excellent. Well, I think those are solid takeaways. It's interesting too, if you think about how closely those 3 takeaways blend with basic content strategy. Saying the right thing to the right people at the right time in the right fashion. It's basically it's communication skills, and you're trying to communicate something more than what your placard says. You're trying to communicate a feeling and credibility and emotion. And being true to yourself and your brand, I think, is a critical part of that.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, if you're a community manager and you're not good on Pinterest and you just don't get it and you just don't like it, find someone who is. Don't try to do it yourself. I have no problem. In the past, I have been like, look, that's not my specialty, but I know someone who's great. I'll send you to them, because you know what? In the future, the person who came to me in the first place might come to me with something else later on. Or the person I sent them to might then send someone to me. And if they don't, whatever, karma comes around and goes around and all that stuff. There you go. Anyway,
Amy,
thank you.
We really, really appreciate you coming on with us today. It's been enjoyable, informative, educational. And I hope it's not going to be the last time.
No, I hope not. I definitely enjoyed visiting today.
Always fun. We have to catch up on some personal chatting anyway.
Yes.
So if we have any follow-up questions or anything, we'll, I don't know. Doc, are we transcribing these? So.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So we'll put some information or a way for people to reach out and ask any questions that they may have or might not have.